Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the structured SOC workflow behind this briefing. This was a coordinated operational effort across Team Alpha, with the lead analyst being myself, James, our threat hunter, Dose, our mitigation analyst, Beverly, our AI prompt engineers, Sam and Judith, our OSINT analyst, Dave, and our scribe, Elizabeth. Each function aligned to define SOC modalities, artifact validation, identity telemetry correlation, exposure containment sequencing, OSINT collaboration, and the structured AI-assisted hypothesis testing. Today, I will be presenting the consolidated executive findings on behalf of the team. Imagine you're an engineer at a global electronics company. You work remotely. You build components that integrate into automotive systems. One afternoon, you download a file. Maybe it's a vendor document. Maybe it's a software update. Maybe it's something that looks completely normal. Nothing crashes, nothing looks suspicious, but in the background, an Infostealer malware quietly installs. It doesn't encrypt your files. It doesn't pop up a ransom note. It doesn't trigger alarms. It simply does one thing. It harvests your stored credentials, your browser passwords, your session tokens, your Jira access. Now here's the part that matters. You happen to be the third-party partner with access to Jaguar Land Rover's internal Jira environment. Those credentials get logged. They get sold. They sit in a database on the dark web, and they remain valid. Not for days, not for weeks, for years. Fast forward, the threat actor purchases those credentials and logs directly into JLR's Jira server. No exploit, no 0 days, just valid authentication. This is how a single endpoint infection becomes a supply chain breach. That is how identity becomes the new perimeter. And that is the case we're walking through today. Let's walk through what we confirmed, what we inferred, and what this means for leadership. This briefing presents a structured technical investigation into a credential-driven exposure that extended from LG Electronics into the Jaguar Land Rover's engineering ecosystem. We will walk you through confirmed artifacts, correlated intelligence, and structured containment. Let's begin with the facts. We will cover 3 disciplined sections. First, the incident snapshot, what we confirmed, and what remains inferred. Second, the forward risk model, what attackers can realistically do with this level of access. Third, the SOC operation response, containment and detection, and structural prevention improvements. Our objective is clarity, accountability, and action. Now let's anchor this to evidence. The initial compromise window was July 8th, 2021, confirmed through Stealer log timestamps. The malware family was identified as Redline Stealer, assessed with high confidence based on artifact collection patterns, file naming conventions, and comprehensive browser data harvesting consistent with Redline's known capabilities. The affected endpoint traced to a LG Electronics employee device in Seoul, South Korea. Corroborated through IP geolocations 125, 187, and the rest is redacted, whois validation, and device fingerprinting. The Stealer log confirmed extraction of credentials for 56 corporate systems, including stored browser credentials for Jira environment associated with JLR partnership, specifically the JLR Codebeamer instance in jlrcb.lge.com. The blast radius extends beyond LG Electronics. This became a supply chain event the moment those JLR Jira credentials were exfiltrated. This was not exploitation of a system vulnerability. It was authenticated access through stolen identity. So how did this technically unfold? Initial access likely occurred through spear phishing targeting LGE automotive engineers. While not artifact confirmed, this aligns with common Redline Stealer deployment vectors and is corroborated by intelligence reporting on automotive industry targeting. The device was a personal unmanaged Windows 10 machine assessing corporate systems via Citrix VDI, confirmed by default machine naming desktop BBJ8T6T, install software artifacts in absence of endpoint detection and response tools. Once executed, Redline Stealer harvested locally stored browser credentials from Chrome, Edge, and Internet Explorer, session cookies with 8 to 24-hour validity, and Authy 2FA backup tokens containing TOTP seeds. This is confirmed by the credential log artifact structure and collected browser data files. Those credentials were then exfiltrated to a command and control server and entered into the dark web credential markets. That market presence is corroborated through Stiller log ID validation and OSINT intelligence on redline credential sales on Genesis Market, Russian Market, and 2easy forums. A threat actor could then reuse those valid credentials to authenticate directly into LG's SSO, VPN, and JLR Jira environment without triggering exploit-based detections. When identity is compromised, traditional perimeter defense becomes irrelevant. Now let's understand the scale of amplification. One endpoint infection created exposure across 56 corporate systems. Because credentials were stored in the browser, identity gateways such as SSO and VPN systems were directly compromised, confirmed by URL artifacts. Engineering environments like Jira, 5-Codebeamer, ALL systems were directly implicated, confirmed by compromised URL lists. Code repositories, including Git, Gerrit, and SVN, were exposed, confirmed by credential artifacts. Code signing accounts and software distribution systems were compromised, creating supply chain malware distribution capability. Lifecycle management systems, 3 Windchill PLM instances were exposed, containing product designs, CAD files, and manufacturing specifications. Third-party partner integrations, specifically the JLL Codebeamer instance, amplified this effect. The trust relationship extends access beyond the originating organization. This demonstrates horizontal expansion through identity reuse and federated trust. Now we focus on what truly matters, the crown jewels. Identity systems are the control plane of the enterprise. SSO compromise enables access to all 56 federated services. VPN compromise enables direct internal network access and ransomware deployment capability. Engineering repositories represents intellectual property and product development pipelines. 5-Codebeamer instances contain proprietary automotive software for navigation, vehicle components, and vehicle systems. Code signing infrastructure represents downstream trust. Compromised signing credentials enable malware distribution and trusted LG or JLR software. A SolarWinds-style supply chain attack. PLL systems contain complete product designs, bills of material, and manufacturing specifications worth millions in competitive intelligence. From a board perspective, this translates to operational risk. Manufacturing downtime costs $22,000 per minute in automotive. Regulatory risk, ISO 26262 and UNECE WP.29 safety critical reporting requirements. Brand risk, signed malware destroys customer trust. Revenue risk, IP threat eliminates competitive advantage. This was not an isolated endpoint event, it was a trust boundary event, which brings us to the first core finding. Re-imaging a laptop does not invalidate stolen credentials. Session tokens remain valid until revoked server-side. SSO sessions typically persist 8 to 24 hours. VPN sessions 4 to 12 hours. Browser stored credentials persist independently of endpoint remediation. The passwords.txt file confirms plain text credential storage. This is where most organizations make a mistake. They treat device cleanup as incident resolution, while the identity remains active across SSO, VPN, Jira, and every federated service. The long tail exposure window, in this case, 4.5 years, from July 8, 2021 to February 10, 2026, creates delayed detonation risk. If those credentials were not rotated, the attacker still has access today. Our threat hunting modality focuses on identity log correlation, session analysis, and privilege review to determine exposure duration. Identity containment must precede endpoint containment. Now let's address MFA. Multi-factor authentication was in place, but the Authy backup file was exfiltrated, confirmed by Authy.zip artifact. That file contains TOTPCs, the cryptographic secrets that generate one-time codes. If that attacker has the Authy password, likely present in the passwords.txt file, they could generate valid MFA codes indefinitely. Session cookies were also harvested, confirmed by browser cookie artifacts, Those cookies represents already authenticated states. An attacker can replay those cookies and bypass MFA entirely. This creates a bypass scenario, even when MFA is enabled. SOC priorities therefore include revoking all Authy TOTP seeds, invalidating all SSO sessions globally, forcing MFA enrollment with phishing-resistant hardware tokens such as FIDO2 or YubiKey, reducing session lifetimes to 4 hours for VPN, 8 hours for SSO, implementing token binding to prevent replay attacks. MFA without token governance leaves residual risk. Now we examine amplification beyond the endpoint. Third-party credentials provide high leverage because they inherit trust relationships. The Jira integration between LG Electronics and Jaguar Land Rover served as a trust anchor, confirmed by JLR Codebeamer URL in the compromised credential list. Jira is where requirements, designs, and test cases are stored for joint engineering projects. Once authenticated, a threat actor could access engineering workflows, exfiltrate intellectual property, modify requirements, or inject malicious code into the shared repositories, all without exploiting software vulnerabilities. This is the moment this became a supply chain event. The breach risk extended from one LG endpoint to interconnected JLR engineering ecosystems and potentially to other JLR suppliers through the same trust relationships. If the attacker pivots from LG to JLR, they can compromise vehicle software, a safety-critical supply chain attack affecting millions of vehicles. Supply chain trust must be treated as tier 0 exposure. Let's evaluate forward-looking risk scenarios. High probability, high impact. Valid account reuse. Those credentials are likely still active. An attacker can log in as a legitimate user to SSO, VPN, Jira, and engineering systems. Medium probability, critical impact. Repository compromise. If the attacker accesses code repositories, they can inject backdoors or exfiltrate proprietary automotive software source code. Low probability, catastrophic impact, code signing abuse. If the attacker uses sign-in credentials, they can distribute malware as trusted LG or JLR software. A supply chain attack affecting customer devices and vehicles. Medium probability, high impact. Intellectual property theft. PLL systems contain product designs worth millions. Exfiltration enables counterfeit production or competitive intelligence loss. High probability, high impact. Ransomware pivot. VPN access enables network-wide ransomware deployment. Manufacturing downtime costs $22,000 per minute. The probability impact matrix shows identity misuse as the most immediate and credible risk vector. Now we move into containment. In the first 24 hours, identity containment is prioritized. Force password resets for all compromised accounts. Revoke VPN access for the compromised device. Invalidate all SSO sessions globally for compromised accounts. Revoke all Authy MFA tokens and force re-enrollment. Revoke all API tokens for engineering systems, Codebeamer, Git, Garrett, OpenGrok, and more. Why? Active identity equals active risk. Without server-side validation, compromise persists. Within 7 days, vendor coordination and privilege audits ensure trust boundaries are tightened. Coordinate with JLR security team, notify of potential compromise, and conduct joint investigation. Audit Jira access logs for anomalies, unauthorized access to JLR projects, bulk data exports, permission changes. Review VPN, SSO, and code repository logs from July 8, 2021 onwards for attackers' return indicators. Isolate JLR partnership systems on separate network segmentation. Within 4 weeks, structural improvements prevent reoccurrence. Deploy user and entity behavior analytics for identity anomaly detection. Implement adaptive MFA with geolocation and device fingerprinting. Enforce hardware tokens like FIDO2, YubiKey for all privileged accounts. Mandate password manager usage. Prohibit browser password storage. Deploy EDRs on all devices accessing corporate system via MDM. Reduce session timeouts. For SSO, 8 hours. For VPN, 4 hours. Implement token binding to prevent SAML or OAuth token replay. Mitigation sequencing was structured and deliberate. Detection ensures we validate containment. We analyze identity logs for anomalous authentications consistent with MITRE ATT&CK T1078, valid accounts, unusual login locations, impossible travel, concurrent sessions from different IPs. We review browser credential extraction patterns aligned to T1555, credentials from password stores, passwords.txt artifacts confirms plain text credential storage. We assess session tokens, use pattern associated with T1539, still web session cookie, browser cookie artifacts confirms session hijacking capability. VPN telemetry was reviewed for logins from the compromised IP, which was 125.187 and the rest is redacted, or device desktop BBJ8T6T after July 8, 2021. JIRA audit logs were analyzed for unauthorized access to JLR projects, bulk data exports, or permission changes. MFA re-enrollment events were correlated to artifact timestamps to identify accounts that have not re-enrolled since the compromise. OSINT corroborated credential exposure timelines through dark web artifact validation and redline Stiller market intelligence. AI-assisted prompt engineering accelerated log correlation and structured hypothesis validation, serving as a force multiplier, not a decision maker. Detection assumes credential reuse, not malware persistent. Prevention defines resilience. Phishing-resistant MFA adoption must reach 100% of privileged accounts within 30 days. Current coverage is estimated at 50%. Industry benchmarks show hardware-backed MFA, such as FIDO2 or YubiKey, reduces credential replay success rates by over 99%. Managed device enforcement should target full gateway coverage within 60 days, require corporate managed devices or MDM enrollment for all Citrix VDI access. Zero trust maturity models show segmentation reduces lateral risk exposure significantly. Session lifetime reductions measurably decrease token replay windows, reduce SSO sessions to 8 hours, VPN to 4 hours. Current average is 24 hours. NIST guidelines supports minimizing session duration. Credential rotation cadence should reduce average token age to 48 hours for API tokens, 90 days for privileged accounts, 180 days for standard accounts. Current average token age is indefinite. These controls are measurable, enforceable, and aligned to the risk narrative we have walked through. We close with clarity. This incident was not driven by a zero-day exploit. It was driven by a valid login. It exposed how identity, when unmanaged, becomes the attack surface. It demonstrated how third-party trust relationships amplify risk. One LG endpoint created exposure across JLR's engineering ecosystem. And it reinforced that endpoint remediation alone is insufficient. Re-imaging the device did not invalidate the credentials. What we accomplished through this investigation was clarity. We validated artifacts, 56 compromised systems, redline Stiller malware, Authy2FA bypass, JLR partnership exposure. We corroborated exposure, Stiller log ID, IP geolocation, dark web intelligence, OSINT validation. We modeled forward risk, supply chain attack, ransomware deployment, IP theft, code signing abuse. We structured containment, identity response, token revocation, session invalidation, vendor coordination. We translated technical evidence into executive action. The lesson is definitive. Contain identity first. Re-imaging devices is not enough. Credentials must be rotated, tokens revoked, sessions invalidated. Harden MFA beyond convenience. TOTPC session cookies bypass MFA. Hardware tokens and token binding are required. Treat third-party access as tier 0. Supply chain trust is a vulnerability. The moment credentials cross organizational boundaries, the blast radius multiplies. Because in modern breaches, the perimeter is not the firewall. The perimeter is identity, and identity must be governed accordingly. Thank you. Thank you for listening.